Hey, I'm Dean and this is Legacy Voyage. In Season 1, I'm documenting my journey to earning my first 100K net worth as a full-time college student. Join me as I share some of the lessons I learned along the way.
I remember this one time where I was in Oregon and I'm just chilling. I was still in like elementary school, so I was a tablet kid. I was chilling with my tablet in the living room, just vibing, probably watching YouTube or whatever. And then all I hear from the bathroom is ding, like a loud yell. It's just like ding, and it's my sister. I'm like, bro, what just happened? Like, are you okay? Because you should not be screaming that loud in this home right now. And so I immediately like jump up, like, what the heck is going on? And she's like, come over here right now. Bro, she's so mad. And I'm so confused at this point. Come over here right now. And I'm get up and I'm so confused. I put my tablet down and everything. And then I slowly walk over to where she's at. She's in the bathroom. I slowly walk over and she's like, look at this. What is this? I was like, a toilet? Like, what's going on? Like, it's a toilet that you're looking at. No, what is this? And she points closer. I'm like, well, that is a toilet seat. Well, I mean, well, where are you trying to go with this? And she's like, and what is it? I was like, she was apparently mad that I left the toilet seat up. And my 5th grade-year-old self, I mean, I was so confused at this point. I'm like, bro, what are you yapping about? Like, literally, it's a toilet seat, dog. Just put it down. Like, same way I put it up, you use your hands and you can put it down. And I was so confused as that little kid. I was like, bro, all you have to do is put the toilet seat down, bro. Like, what are you on about? And then she put it down and she was like still mad at that point. And I think after that, she just learned to live with it. Cause I mean, I never really learned my lesson. I sort of just kept doing the toilet seat. And then there was another incident where I was with my uncle and it was literally the exact same scenario. I was like, I think at this point I was like eating food, we were chilling with the fam. And then all I hear from the bathroom is like same exact stream and everything. But this time it's my uncle. So he's like, Dean, get over here. So I'm like, I'm so confused at this point. I slowly walk over. And then as soon as I turn the corner to walk into the bathroom, I'm like, oh my God, this again? And he's like, you leave the toilet seat like this? I was like, yeah, is it a big deal? And he's like, yes, dude, you're gonna learn when you get a wife. That's what he said. And his fallback to like, you'll learn when you get a wife. From that point forward, I've sort of just like tried to put the toilet seat down or tried to remember. Like, I'm definitely not like 100% accurate with it, but I've at least tried to remember that. Because here was the big lesson with this story is I learned, or at least to me, with my like 5th grade-year-old self, and even at that point where I was in probably high school, maybe in college by then. And at that point I was like, bro, I mean, logically speaking, it's just like using your mind, being rational, just put the toilet seat down. I mean, I use the same hands to put it up. So I don't understand why you can't just put it down. And that's what was going on in my logical brain. And then eventually I came to realize where I heard this advice talking about relationships, and the advice went something like, pick your battle. And honestly, I was kind of confused about what that meant, or I didn't really know what it meant fully. Like, people always said, and I heard this advice a lot, it said, pick your battles, but I didn't really understand it. But the way this person phrased it, I think his name was Onyx Singal or something like that. But the way he phrased it in this YouTube video that I was watching it made a lot of sense to me. He basically said something along these lines where if there's something that the other person is super passionate about and I don't really care, like it could go either way, then I just won't fight them on that. Like I'm gonna pick a different battle. Like I'll let them win it. And this toilet seat story, like that was a perfect example where, I mean, it seemed to me like females were so adamant about this. To this day, I mean, I don't fully understand why they're so against it, but I've just chosen to pick a different battle. Like, to me, all it takes is like an extra, not even 30 seconds. I mean, it's literally like 2 seconds. I'll just put the toilet seat down, go on about my day, and I don't have to hear them yell my name from the bathroom ever again. At least in the times where I do remember, I don't have to hear them yell. And it really got me thinking about, especially recently, as I've been diving back into religion and Christianity and all these things, it really got me thinking about how logic and emotion are really two sides of the same coin. And here's what I mean by that. When approaching something like addiction, for example, and we only use our logical brains, it's actually more logical to account for our emotions when we're trying to think through things. A couple days ago, and we talked about this idea, and I thought it was so fascinating. The way, especially as I've been thinking through like religion, for example, and two synonyms for each word, logic being rational, being good with weighing the evidence and weighing the decisions, and emotions being faith. It seems to me that being rational and having faith are two sides of the same coin, where we're actually more logical when we account for something like faith. And in the same way, faith is made stronger when we're being rational. And the reason I bring this up is I read this book recently, and I want to get into this later too, but it talked about this fascinating idea that I've been exploring, especially with my interest in philosophy and all those things. But it talked about this fascinating idea I found called epistemic permissivism. I think that's how you say it. Epistemic permissivism, something like that. Literally, when I tried writing this word into my Notion page, it thought it was a typo because I guess this is not really a word, but this view goes something like this. There are evidential situations that rationally permit more than one attitude toward a proposition. Now, that's basically a super long, complicated way of saying there are some cases where two sides who are opposed are both rational. And here's an example of that. An example that really resonated with me when I heard it. I was like, oh, that actually makes a ton of sense. Let's say there's a mother, or not even a mother. Let's say you, for example, who's ever listening to this, let's say you are framed, or in your mind you think you're framed, where you're put on trial and you're framed for murder. Someone is accusing you of murder. Now they have your DNA at the scene, they have your blood at the scene, they have your fingerprints there, everything, all of the physical evidence, they all point to you. So of course, like if I were a juror, or maybe even if you were a juror, not in your shoes, all the evidence points to you being the murderer. You are guilty of this crime. But consider this. Consider a scenario where you, as the person who's being framed, in your memory, literally, which has usually never been wrong in the past, or at least this probably isn't something that you'd forget about. You in your memory, which is something that you only have access to, you have no recollection of ever murdering someone. And so because of that, you come to the conclusion, and you rationally come to the conclusion of you not murdering this person, whereas everyone else also rationally comes to the conclusion where you did murder that person. And so this is one example, taken to the extreme of course, but this is one example of epistemic permissivism, where it's a case, two sides that are completely opposite or completely opposed to each other actually come to different conclusions based on the or at least evidence they have at their disposal. Now, why am I talking about this? Why am I bringing all of this stuff up? Because I think religion and I think Christianity is one of these cases. And we'll dive a lot deeper into that later in the episode. But right now, I want to talk about two terms that I think I mentioned or brought up in prior episodes, but I want to bring them up now, especially because it's been so top of mind for me lately. And I think I found some helpful definitions for myself. And I sort of probably should clarify what I mean by epistemic in the first place. I think it has something to do with like knowledge. Like, for example, epistemology is the study of knowledge. Like, can we know things? What does it mean for someone to say, I know something? Things like that. That's what epistemology study is. And so when I say epistemic, all it means is like a type of knowledge. I think. Honestly, I don't fully understand it, but that's how much I understand it for now. Now, let's move on to these two terms I was talking about. There's this thing called epistemic rationality and practical rationality, where epistemic rationality, let me first give an example. An example will go something like this. Say you're diagnosed with cancer and someone is going to give you a medicine, right? Without the medicine, you have like a 10% chance of surviving. But if you take this medicine and you believe that this medicine will work, that number jumps from 10% to 40. But all this medicine is like a placebo thing. But the crucial difference is that you believing it'll actually work. So the question is, should you believe that you'll survive? Because by all the evidence, you shouldn't survive this cancer. You shouldn't survive making it through. But it seems in some type of way rational to make the jump, because you go from this 10% survival rate to this 40% survival rate. And that's what these terms differentiate themselves with. It's epistemic rationality versus practical rationality. And here's how I define them. Epistemic rationality is when we're considering reasons that P is true, P being some sort of proposition. In this case, the proposition is you will survive. And so we can look at all the reasons for that proposition looking at all the reasons that you will survive. And we can come to conclusions that way. And being epistemically rational, we come to the conclusion that you will definitely not survive this thing. Or at least you are likely to not survive this thing. And this is different from practical rationality, which is reasons for believing that P is true. Now, the big difference here is it's not necessarily reasons that P is actually true. It's more so reasons that you should believe P true. And that's exactly what practical rationality is all about. Like, for example, in the placebo example, one reason for believing that you will survive is that your survival rate will jump up. And so that is a practical reason for why you should believe you will survive. Now, this will all be super helpful to keep in mind as we go into the next part of this podcast episode, but I probably should have given this warning earlier. This podcast episode is going to be longer than all the others, or it's going to be longer than usual because it's been a while since I've recorded one of these, and I've just been philosophizing and thinking like crazy. So I have so many bullet points to get to and so many things that I want to talk about. So keep this whole idea of being rational and epistemic and practical rationality, keep it in the back of your mind as it'll come up in like 10 or 20-ish minutes. But for now, I want to go into something else I've been thinking about is this idea of turning even though into because. Now, the reason I was thinking about this is I asked a whole bunch of parents, I was like, how do you balance loving your child and forgiving them and giving them what they want? How do you balance that with holding them accountable? Because I think it's one of the hardest things really in life. And I'm not sure if I mentioned this in the last episode either, but this is a tough paradox. And it's something that I'm still trying to struggle with this or wrestle with this idea of how do I even love myself and forgive myself while also holding myself accountable? Because both sides pushed to the extreme, it becomes something that's very, very dangerous. I think the wrong way to think about it is something like this. I will love my kid even though I hold them accountable. Or even the opposite. I'm holding them accountable even though I love you. And turning that even though into because, where I'm holding my kid accountable because I love them. Or I love my kid because I'm holding them accountable. And shifting it in this way where both sides go hand in hand. Like I was mentioning earlier, this idea of being logical while also considering emotions. And it's not I'm being logical even though I'm considering emotions. It's I'm being logical because I'm considering my emotions. And considering your emotions becomes a part of what it means to be logical. Think. Right, so hopefully you're following on. Now I'm moving on to another topic that I've been thinking about called, or not really a topic, but more of like something I've been philosophizing about. And it's past versus future focus. I was talking with someone and they were going on and on about their past. Like, oh, I remember when I did this and I did that. And man, I miss when we did these things and those things. And they were going on and on about their past. And that entire time, I was like, I don't know. It kind of hit me the wrong way where I thought to myself how when people are so stuck in the past or so living in the past that they don't really understand what's in the future, that tells me a lot about them as a person. And I've even seen this in myself where when I'm focusing on the past and I'm like, man, I remember when I was that much weight and I remember when I had this and I had that, it takes me away from what I could be and what my future holds for me. And this brings up another thing that I've been wrestling with is how do I stay present in the moment while also thinking about my future? Because I wouldn't say it's completely healthy in a way. I would say something like this. Thinking about your future constantly probably doesn't sound like a healthy thing. I mean, when you're constantly like, oh, one day I want to be this, one day I want to be that, then eventually you'll get to when you're 100 years old, you're still thinking about the future and you're like, oh my goodness, my whole life just passed me by and I didn't even know it. But I think the inverse is true. When we're constantly in the past or we're constantly in the present, we're not thinking about what could happen in the future, what we could do in the future. And so I think both sides push to the extreme. Like I keep saying, they seem like an unhealthy way to go about life, but I'm still trying to think about what it looks like to both be present in the moment, but also be thinking about the future. And this brings up another thing that I've been, today I'm just talking about all these different dichotomies, but this brings up another thing that I've been thinking about is the duality or this other dichotomy of Islander vibes versus like American vibes or fast-paced type of deal. Because whenever I'm with my family or whenever I'm back on the islands or on vacation or something, like everything is just so laid back. Everything is just like so present in the moment. We're just trying to have fun, playing cards or whatever. And no one there is really thinking about, oh, I want to do this in the future. Or I want this for my career. Or I'm going to lock down this internship this summer. But it's so different when I come out here to Northwestern and literally every kid, as soon as they hit campus, like, what clubs am I going to join? What's my major going to be? What's my internship going to be? What career path do I want to go down? Like they're all go, go, go. And they're so driven and motivated to do all these things. And it's so different from the Islander vibes. And this, again, gets into the same thing. You might be noticing a pattern here. But this again gets into the same thing where both sides pushed to the extreme, they both seem unhealthy in a way. And so trying to find what it looks like to be present in the moment, being the islander vibes, while also thinking about the future. Thinking about the future of like, how can I take care of my families? How can I be the best self I can possibly be? Those types of things. Cool. Now here's another thing I've been thinking about is the idea between fleeting dopamine and fulfilling dopamine. Now, you probably know what dopamine is. It's that addiction chemical or the good job chemical that we get when we do something we like maybe it's eating a cookie or something, or maybe it's going for a run or getting a workout in. But we get hit by the same thing called dopamine. I was talking to my friend, and he mentioned that sometimes when he's bored or he doesn't really know what to do, there's kind of like two camps, so there's two categories of dopamine that he turns to. Either it's something like scrolling on his phone through Instagram, TikTok, whatever, or it's something like making music, which is something he actually really enjoys and is fulfilling to him. Well, the difference between the two is that one type of dopamine that he gets is fleeting, where it's just like in the moment, but after that, it's just like completely gone. Whereas the other one, it's fulfilling. It's actually getting him closer to the person he wants to become or to his dream identity. And in a lot of ways, I see that in myself too, where going back to the food example, I get a lot of dopamine from eating food, which is like a fleeting sense of dopamine. Whereas I also get a lot of dopamine from doing things like this, like making a podcast or building something like a website or designing it or whatever. Those things also give me dopamine, and like reading books. But on the one hand, we've got dopamine that's fulfilling and helping me get towards my dream identity, versus the other hand, which is fleeting and only lasts for the moment. Something else I was talking about with my friend is pivoting the vehicle, not the destination. Now that I'm in the startup game, even with the startup that I'm doing right now, We Are Nesian, there have been so many pivots. It started as a podcast, then from there it went to like general media, and then from there it went to a community of Pacific Islander businesses, entrepreneurs, and then from there it turned into what it is now, which is like a umbrella of everything, but more focused on the agency model. So there's all these different things and so many pivots along the way. So when I say this idea of pivoting the vehicle, not the destination remains the same. The destination being my dream identity, and entrepreneurship or the startup gains being the vehicle I'm using to get there. But more zoomed in than that, it's the destination being some type of startup or building something cool, and the vehicle is whatever the startup takes form as. Is it going to be a media company? Is it going to be a community company? Is it going to be a tech thing? I don't know. But either way, each of those are different vehicles to the same destination. And I'm a huge believer in taking risks and playing offensively as we're young, because we are able to take more risks and make more pivots, meaning pivoting the vehicle a lot more. Okay, the final thing I want to talk about on this section of the podcast, the philosophizing section, is the idea of focusing on one thing. One big thing. I forgot who it was. It was some big time entrepreneur, maybe Peter Thiel or something, but one of those type of caliber entrepreneurs. And he had this thing that he was kind of known for. And he was known for asking all of his employees, what's the one thing you're going to focus on? What's the one goal? What's the one metric that you're focusing on? Because he noticed that when his employees or even his managers or even himself, when they focus on all these different things that they have going on in their lives, then they don't really do the one thing that needs to get done. I've kind of ran into different versions of this from different people. Here are a couple of examples. A couple months back, I was doing an internship with a search fund, and I was basically with him for like almost a year. So I was working super closely with him, basically led our team of interns on the outreach sourcing part. And by nearing the end of my time with him, we eventually got 2 deals under LOI, which is basically like he had the opportunity to buy 2 companies. But before he decides to buy those companies, we go under what's called LOI, where the team and him and all of us, we're diving deep into this company to make sure that this is something we actually want to buy. Like, make sure it's not some dinky company, make sure everything's good. And what happens if we buy this and some employees leave? What happens if we buy this and it doesn't grow anymore? Really looking at the opportunities there. And when evaluating the company, there's this question that he always asks me: what would be a deal killer? What would completely kill this deal? And there were a couple things. We're in the dental industry, so there were a couple things, like maybe it would be healthcare funding in that state. Another one might be the wages that they're getting paid, because if right now they're getting paid way below the normal salary for a normal dentist, then we'd have to go in and then pay them the actual salary or a reasonable salary. And then after that, profit margins are cut. So I remember going through them and we would brainstorm a whole bunch of things, a whole bunch of lists that would be deal killers. If this thing were true, it would completely kill the deal. It's kind of like red flags in relationships, or depending how you define red flags. But it's like, if this thing were true about the other person, then I'm completely like, there's no chance of anything working out. Kind of like that. Another guy I was thinking about with this example is a dude called Russell Brunson. Like back when I first started this entrepreneurship type game, he was the guy I was really looking into. Read all his books, was fascinated by the dude. But he's basically like a big time entrepreneur, ClickFunnels dude. And one of his books called Expert Secrets, he talks about this idea called the big domino, which basically means something like this. If I can make them believe that my opportunity is the key to getting the result that they want most, and the only way to do that is via my vehicle, then all other objections and concerns are null, and they have to give me money. But basically, he thought about it like this. Imagine you have all these little dominoes, right? All these little dominoes that a potential customer is setting up, and they're all objection. Like, oh, it's so expensive, or I don't have enough money, or my spouse wouldn't let me do that. All these little dominoes that they'd be setting up. He's saying that this is like the big domino. That means if you can knock this big domino over, then everything else doesn't matter. All the other objections, they don't matter. And another take on this idea of focusing on the one thing is by a philosopher dude. I think he's German, but his name is spelled with a W at the beginning, Wittgenstein. And he has this concept or this idea called hinges. Hinges are beliefs whose rejection would rationally necessitate extensive reorganization or the complete destruction of what should be considered as empirical evidence, or more generally, of our epistemic practices. That's how he defines hinges. Now, an easier way to explain it would be something like, imagine a door hinge, right? You have the hinges and then you have the actual door. If the hinges come loose, or if the hinges break, then the entire door falls apart. Whereas if the knob breaks, then you still might be able to use it. If the actual wood on the door is kind of scratched, you'll still be able to use the door. But if the hinges break, everything else falls apart. And that's what Wittgenstein means by these hinges. It's these key claims, it's these deal killers, these big dominoes that everything rests on. And by focusing on this one thing and getting it right, then everything else falls into place. Everything else works. Now, this idea of focusing on the one thing, I want to get back to it, especially when I start diving into the book that I read this past week. Before we get into that, let's move on to the next session of this podcast called L's of the Week. Going through different L's I've taken over the past week, or more like 2-ish weeks, because it's been a while since I made this podcast. First L is, I think, a couple weeks ago, I think 2 weeks ago, I set my iPad alarm, but I accidentally made the volume like super low. So it went off at the right time, but I just didn't hear it. So I woke up 3 hours past my alarm. Luckily, there weren't any like big meetings that happened, but that was a big L, because things could have been way worse if I missed a different 3 hours. Another big L that I find pretty funny. There's this challenge going on. There's this TikTok challenge. Because right now I'm at the garage and they have this prize money, right? Like, so at the end of demo day, which is what they call it, every startup, they give their pitch and some judges will decide which one is the best, which one deserves the grand prize of $10,000. Well, something else they started implementing is the TikTok challenge, which is basically an attempt to get more startups more motivated to go viral on TikTok, because they heard all of us start talking about, oh yeah, I want to do more social media marketing. I want more TikTok posts or whatever. But no one actually did it. So they put in this challenge and the grand prize for the challenge is $5,000. I'm like, bro, that's literally half of the grand prize. So how are you going to put in that as a new challenge? That just blew my mind that they put so much money on the line for it. So after that, me and my boy, bro, we were just grinding TikToks. We were like, bro, we got to get that prize money then. So we record a whole bunch of TikToks and we're just having a fun time doing it. But the L for this week, or the L on that, is that none of them went viral. They got like a decent amount of views for where our TikTok profile is at. But as I'm talking about this right now, I think our most recent video only got like 200 views as opposed to 700, which is what our usual ones get. But a couple lessons there. One lesson is that the cha-hoo that we have in Pacific Islander culture, like, ooh, like that thing, I learned that it's spelled with an E instead of an A. So it's CHEEEEHOOO, not CHAAAA. HOOO, which I had no idea about. But we'll see what happens with those TikToks. Now, on to the weekly roundup, which is a collection of quotes, articles, books that I've gathered or read or come across over the past couple weeks. First, let's just talk about this book. It's this book called Taking Pascal's Wager, which I just found fascinating. When I was little, not little, but when I was like in high school, my dad told me about Pascal's Wager, and I thought it was mind-boggling. Like, that makes a ton of sense. And Pascal's Wager goes something like this. When you consider something like Christianity, there are 4 possible outcomes and 2 choices that you have to make. So let's say you make choice number 1, which is believing that Christianity is true. Then there's 2 possibilities after that. If you believe it's true, and it is true, then you get eternal life, you get into heaven, all these cool things. If you believe it's true and it's not true, then it's kind of whatever. Like, you didn't really miss out on anything. But if you choose to not believe in Christianity and it's not true, then it's kind of whatever. Like, you don't really lose anything, you also don't really gain anything. But if you choose not to believe and Christianity is true, then you're basically just screwed over. I mean, you're done for. So the whole argument goes, it's better to hedge your bets or place your bets and wager on Christianity being true. Because if you look at the outcomes and you look at what's possible, you'll get more out of believing Christianity is true and it actually being true versus not believing it's true and it actually is true, or it isn't true. Like, you should commit to Christianity is basically how the whole argument goes. When I first heard this, I was like, oh my goodness, that's genius. But still at the time, I didn't really want to believe in any of the stuff. Me growing up Mormon, he applied it to the Mormon faith. So he was like, might as well place your bets on Mormonism. But then I watched a couple videos and I came across this argument that I found, or like more like a rebuttal or counter for Pascal's wager. And I was like, oh, well, that just throws that completely out of the water. And it was an argument for both sides. So I was watching a Christian debate and an atheist debate. So Christians were debating against the atheists, and someone comes up and asks this question to the atheist side. It was like, what do you make of Pascal's wager? Shouldn't we just hedge our bets towards Christianity? And then the atheist was like, oh, that's a terrible argument. And the reason is because it doesn't take into account what's called the many gods objection. It's not possible, or let me say it like this. Religion isn't like a Boolean. It's not like either God exists or either God doesn't exist. There are actually many, many gods and many different types of gods. You have like the Mormon God, and then you have the Christian God, and then you have the Muslim God, or the Islam God, and then you have the Jewish God, all these different gods. And so it's not necessarily a choice between atheism or Christianity. It's more like a buffet of options between all these different religions. Because even if you do commit to a Christian life, it could turn out that Islam is true and you're still going to hell. So that's what the atheist says about the many gods objection. And then the Christian who was in the same debate, they're like, yeah, we don't really like the Pascal's wager because God knows what's in your heart. And so if you're just like at your deathbed, you're like, oh, I'm just going to hedge my bet. I'm going to say, oh yeah, Christianity is real, this and that. And then you get into heaven, or then you get to judgment day and God is looking at you. He's going to know what's in your heart and if you actually believe in what's true. And so the Christian would say, this Pascal's wager thing, that's all just, that's not true faith. And so you're still probably going to hell, something like that. Well, there's this book called Taking Pascal's Wager, and it takes a very different approach to Pascal's wager in a way that I find so compelling. And it comes back to, if you can remember, back to when I was talking about practical versus epistemic rationality. It combines the two in a way that I find super compelling, because usually the arguments I find for God, they're all epistemic arguments, meaning they're all reasons that God exists. Well, this take on Pascal's wager, it's more of like a practical argument, combining the two actually, where not only does it give reasons that God exists, but it also gives a reason for believing that God exists. The main argument of the book goes something like this. If Christianity has at least a 50% chance of being true, then it is rational to commit to living a Christian life. That's the first premise.
21.
The second premise is that Christianity does have at least a 50% chance of being true. Therefore, it is rational to commit to living a Christian life. There's a couple key differences with this argument as opposed to other ones that I've heard for Christianity or for God. The first one that I'll point out is that the conclusion of this argument isn't necessarily that Christianity is true or that God exists. The conclusion of this argument is that it's rational to commit to living a Christian life. That's all it is. And so it lowers the bar for evidence, or it lowers the bar of what it's trying to prove a lot more than other arguments, I think. And then, like I mentioned, it combines this epistemic reasons for practical reasons. Because going back to that cancer analogy I told you about like believing and then your chance of survival will go from 10% to 40%. The reason that idea struggled in my mind with me was because I thought we could just get ourselves to believe whatever we want. Because realistically, like, if I believe it'll happen, then it's probably more likely to happen. Like, take this for example. If I standing on a rock and I think when I'm gonna jump off the rock, I'm gonna start flying. Maybe the possibility to like a fraction of a percent higher. Would I then still say that it's somehow practically rational to believe that I'm gonna fly one day. Like, that seems wrong to me. So this way of combining the two epistemic and rational or practical sides of things, that made a ton of sense to me. Ever since high school, and me going to a Lutheran school, my senior year, we literally had an apologetics class, which is a whole class dedicated to defending the Christian faith. So we walked through all these different arguments for God, all these different arguments for Jesus. And by the end of it, I was like, low key, some of those arguments, like, they make sense. And then outside of that, there are these arguments I was hearing against God. I was like, low key, some of those arguments make sense. So then I got back to epistemic permissivism, where I saw with the available evidence we have at our disposal, it seems rational for people to come to two very different sides of the argument. For someone to look at the evidence and be like, oh, God does exist, and for another person to look at the evidence and say, oh, God doesn't exist. And so that's where I found myself. I was basically like as agnostic as one could be. I was like, basically, I don't know, but I'm open to either way. Like, I'm open to either way of seeing the world, because both arguments seem to they seem to stand up. And even Christianity specifically, because it's a very unique religion in that it seems to have a lot of evidence for itself on the one thing that really matters most. Like I was talking about this big domino idea, or this one thing. The one thing in Christianity is that Jesus actually rose from the dead. And so we can have and set up all these little dominoes, like how can there be talking animals? Or look at all these things that we might consider bad that happened in the Old Testament. Oh, we can have all these little dominoes. But if the one domino is true, and if that one thing actually happened, then all the other objections, they all fade away. And when focusing on that one thing, and looking at the evidence that actually goes with it. The evidence being something like, we know Jesus was an actual person, we know he was crucified, we know people claim to see him after he was dead, and we know those people died for their beliefs. So there's all those evidence supporting Jesus and who he was. And there's a whole bunch of other evidence supporting or against that claim. Like, well, the Bible isn't really reliable, and most of these eyewitness testimonies weren't really real, things like that. And so I came to the very same claim, like I'm basically agnostic about this whole thing. But there's this quote in the book. In some ways, it makes me think that this thing might have been written like for me, or I'm so grateful that it was written. Here's what the quote says. It's a pretty long one, so try to stick with me here. For an agnostic to seek a relationship with God is to seek a relationship with a being whose existence is in doubt. This is atypical but possible. Compare a situation in which a person camping alone hears some ambiguous but possibly human sounds outside of the circle of firelight and calls out, is that a person? If somebody's out there, you're welcome to come closer. For the agnostic, committing to God will involve prayer, likely in a similar conditional form. For example, if you're there, God, please forgive me for that and help me with this, and so on. An agnostic seeking God will probably also want to attend religious services, although full participation might be ruled out. And the quote goes on and on and on, but basically in this quote, it talks about how an agnostic can commit to living a Christian life. And so low-key, that's just what I've been doing, because there's a bunch of evidence for God, a bunch of evidence against God, that honestly I find is like a 50-50. And then looking at Jesus, there's a bunch of evidence for him, there's also a bunch of evidence against him, and in the same way, it seems like a 50-50. The way the argument goes, it's not necessarily that one is true over the other, it's that I can be rational in committing to a Christian life. So that's honestly what I've decided to do. And if someone asks me, they're like, Dean, do you believe in Jesus or do you believe in God? My response would be like, not necessarily, but it's more like I choose to believe, or I choose to make that commitment. And just like the example they gave with camping and not really knowing if someone's there, like that in a lot of ways is how I see myself. Camping in this thing called life, and I only can see so far, and there's something outside of the light, and I hear something, but I'm calling out, hey, are you there? If you are there, then answer my prayers, or if you are there, then help me through this, or help me through that. And that's kind of what I've been going at in this whole life thing. Moving on to the actual article I found, it was this fascinating read that applied philosophy to Avatar: The Last Airbender, and I thought it was just a fascinating read. It was it was published by someone at BYU. So obviously it has some religious ties into it. But the article is called Philosophy Through Zuko. And it was looking at Zuko's life and applying his idea of identities, and how throughout Zuko's character arc, he started off as this person who had his identities, has his inner and outer identity, they were all perfectly aligned. But by the end of it, he completely switched his identity and the way he saw himself and the way others saw him too. But not necessarily, it was more like pivoting the vehicle instead of pivoting the destination. Now let me explain more of what that means. Basically, you have this dude Zuko, and I'm just gonna assume that you've seen it, because if you haven't seen Avatar: The Last Airbender, well, it's just fire. So check it out for sure. But in the article, it talks about a couple of key terms to understand. Now, low-key, the key terms that he talked about, I didn't really understand or necessarily completely agree with, so I'm going to go with my own terms and apply it to Zuko. And the first thing are these three different types of identities. The first one is inner identity, which are these internal thoughts and desires that we have in our minds. The second one is outer identity, and these are our external words and actions. The third one is our dream identity, which is the person that we want to become. And maybe this just popped in my mind, but maybe I can add like this fourth one. This something along the lines of practical identity, which is the ways we interact with the world and the way other people see us. For example, some of my practical identities is you have Dean the student, then you have Dean the entrepreneur, then you have Dean the rugby player, all these different practical identities that I have. And then another key term that I think is really important is something called an aspirant. It's someone who is aspiring toward a different type of identity, which in this case would always be your dream identity because that's the person we want to become. So with those definitions in mind, let's apply it to Zuko. At the start of the series, his inner identity and outer identity, they mesh super well. He saw himself as someone who had to fight through struggle and overcome it. He was a fighter, and his outer identities, they reflected that. He was on the hunt, on the move, trying to catch the Avatar, because that is what he was called to do. And then in the second book, that's when he goes on this huge internal conflict, where his inner identity still was someone who he thought inside would sacrifice anything to catch the Avatar and fight through struggle and stuff. His outer identity didn't really reflect that. There was a certain point in the series where he literally could have caught the Avatar, could have kept chasing the Avatar through a storm. But instead of going through a storm and putting his entire crew at risk, he turned away, didn't pursue the Avatar, and instead he went against his inner identity. And so that conflict between his inner and outer identity, that caused a lot of conflict within him. And it was the source of, I think at this time he got super sick. I think he lost his ability to firebend, like super strong, something like that. Well, then the story progresses, and then we eventually get to the end where he has this new dream identity. The dream identity not being someone who wants to catch the Avatar, but someone who wants to help the Avatar. And the important distinction here is that he's not necessarily pivoting the destination. In some ways, his dream identity remains the same. Someone who is willing to fight the struggle and overcome it. But he's pivoting the vehicle. Instead of the vehicle being, I'm going to catch the Avatar and prove my honor to my father, or gain my honor from my father, it's more of pivoting the vehicle to helping the Avatar and gaining honor for himself. And there's this quote that Zuko has where he already joined the Avatar's team, or Team Avatar, and he's sleeping, and then Toph comes over, and then he accidentally burns Toph's feet. And then Zuko says something like, "Why am I so bad at being good?" And that, I think, has a lot of wisdom in it, because whenever an aspirant or someone who is aspiring toward their dream identity, me for example, whenever we try to work towards this dream identity that we have in our minds, we're always going to be bad at first. And it's the same thing with anything. Whenever we try something new, like for example, something I want to do is learn Tongan. Whenever I start learning Tongan for the first time, I'm always going to be bad at first. But as we continue to aspire to that new identity that we want for ourselves, then eventually, like Zuko, our inner and outer identity will begin to come back together, and hopefully it will be not perfectly aligned or not exactly like our dream identity, but working toward that dream identity. And by doing so, our practical identities will all begin to converge on that dream identity. And so these are some things I've been thinking through, and there's this whole other idea about how we're raised and how I was raised specifically by my mom in a way where she placed certain identities on me. She was like, "Dean, you're the smart one. Dean, you're the one who's gonna get good grades. You're the one who's gonna buy me the house when I get old and take care of me." And I felt like I had to live up to that identity that she placed on me. And so I did all these things that it was kind of like a feedback loop. I did all these things that showed her I could potentially be the smart one or could get good grades and all those things. And then she kept reinforcing that identity. But I also saw in cases where you might be reinforcing some pretty negative identity. Like if my entire life I grew up and my mom, and she called me dumb. It's like, "Dean, you're the dumb one. Dean, you got bad grades. Oh, that's so super typical of you. Of course you get bad grades because you're dumb." In my entire life, that's what I'm reinforced with. Then eventually I just begin to live up to that identity. And so those are the other types of things that I'm thinking about when it comes to identities. But this specific thing, talking about Zuko and bringing together all these different identities and converging on the dream identity, I think is super powerful. And when we, at least for myself, placing that dream identity as Jesus Christ, Like someone who, I think if nothing else, had some pretty good teaching and was a pretty phenomenal leader. Cool, now to end off the weekly roundup, I found this video. This video was actually so funny to me. I think it's called like Promised Land, the name of the series, but there's this pilot episode that they made. And if you could think of this, it's where The Office meets the Bible, and it's like an Office version retelling of the Bible. So, bro, it's just so funny. It's like a reality show. If Moses leading his people out of Egypt, if that was a reality show, and if that was recorded by The Office, same people who made The Office, then this is what it would be. It's a phenomenal, it's just so funny. Like, check it out for sure. But to round out this entire episode, man, I feel like I've been talking for ages right now. Sheesh. To round out this episode, let me go on to the life update, starting with myself. Update on myself is that, low-key, I feel like ever since committing to this Christian life and things kind of making sense in my head when it comes to Christianity, I think things have actually fallen in place a lot better. Not saying that they're completely perfect, like, oh, now I'm super on top of my health and everything. But it is to say I've been more on top of my health than I've been for the past months. And just saying it out loud, but it feels phenomenal. Like, the past 2 days, I've gone to sleep at reasonable times, and I've gotten enough sleep, and I wasn't binge eating like crazy. And so it's been a good journey so far, and really trying to make time for myself, being able to live with the boredom and away from distractions and all those things. That's super helpful, and something that I want to get better at as I continue on this journey. Moving on to update on my people. Honestly, I haven't been too focused on my people, and the reason being is that I really want to focus on myself, because if I can't get that right, then nothing else really matters. So I haven't really been traveling, haven't really been going out to hang out with the fam or anything. Just been usually to myself and really trying to focus in on taking care of myself. I have done is hang out with the boys, the Caddy Academy boys. Yeah, it's good living with them right now. It's just like sometimes I'll come home and we just play Super Smash Bros. Or we just play ping pong or something, and it's just a good time. Or I'm just able to hang out with them and chill, talk, hang out. So that's been good for sure. But moving on to update on my work. I could probably go on and on about this, but I feel like this episode has already gone pretty long. So to summarize everything, we've done the recent pivot to more of an agency model where hopefully it'll go something like this. I'm working with 5 businesses right now, building them a free website, and from there, hopefully upselling them into Polytabs, into getting the software so they have this all-in-one CRM, website builder, email marketing, everything that they need to run their business. So hopefully that's where it gets to. And I hired someone off of Upwork to start doing the websites for me because I was spending way too much time on that stuff. And then another super cool insight that I had is, as Pacific Islanders, we have this like inherent trust with each other. And it's the reason why I think my messages or my cold messages work probably more than others, is because there's this trust that we have as island. And so I might lean into that more, especially as we start exploring this whole Nesian VA and virtual assistant idea. Like, bro, it's actually crazy because I'll tell this story again in the next episode, but I got connected to a dude through a random cold email and 2 intros to a guy who used to be in the same ward that I'm currently in, or the same church that I'm currently in, but he left like 2 years ago, but he came back to visit, and so I met his sons 2 weeks ago when he did visit, and so it was like, man, it's just like a super roundabout way of getting to connected with that dude. But I guess this is one of the things we ran into as playing the startup game. But yeah, things are moving, things are rocking and rolling. We'll see how things actually turn out and what we can do with everything, but I'll see you in the next episode.
I record these episodes completely free to share success with everyone. So the only thing I ask is that if you learned anything or found something interesting in this episode, just leave a review and share it with a friend. Only takes 5 seconds and it would mean the world. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next episode. Tatok, see you.